Congressman Paul Ryan, a ranking member of banking, a member of the President's Fiscal Commission, which is up and running, right?
The only game in town left.
We got some comments from Erskine Bowles over the weekend talking about spending being a cancer on the economy.
Right.
Is this commission the beginning of a new era in which spending is really goes beyond political rhetoric? You're
giving it too much credit. I would like to think that the commission is the beginning of a new era, but take a look at what Congress is doing or what it's not doing. This year, for the first time since the 1974 Budget Act passed, the House isn't even doing a budget. So no budget will pass this year. What the House just did was they deemed themselves the ability to spend. So not having a budget doesn't mean we're not spending. It means quite the opposite. Only spending is going to occur without any prioritization of spending, without any restraints. And so the debt is on a tear. And so we are doubling down with this kind of borrow and spend mentality. And so we're going in completely the wrong direction, fiscal policy, from my perspective. The budget that the President put this year says, well, the Fiscal Commission should fix some of these things. I hope we accomplish some spending control and reduction. I'm not sure what's going to happen at the end of the day with the Fiscal Commission. But an executive order commission should not be a substitute for Congress actually doing its job.
Yeah. Right. Senator Gregg was here yesterday and had sort of some of the same points, especially some of
the commission as well.
The hurdles you need to get anything done, right?
14 out of the 18 commissioners have to vote to approve any plan to be forwarded to Congress.
What's the best case scenario then? What's the best they can do? What's the best you guys can do?
I try not to get into table talk. I try not to get into here's what we are going to get done here, because I don't know, first of all, but I think it's wrong and sort of it's not good form to fellow commissioners to say what is and is not on the table or off the table. You know who I am. You know what I believe in. There's a very big array of people on this commission, a wide swath of people from an ideological and partisan standpoint. So who knows what's going to come out of this thing. I'm hoping we get some real spending control and spending reform coming out of this thing. But again, that's no substitute for the fact that the government right now has no budget.
But here's what I think is the biggest question right now. We saw this incredible stimulus that was passed, that was given out to the states to try and get them through the worst parts, the depths of the recession. Right. We've come out the other side, and we're about a year and a half down the road. We expected that the states would be able to be back standing on their own feet at this point. You read stories about California and Illinois and other states.
I watched the CDS spreads on the states, California, Illinois, New Jersey.
That are in huge trouble because the money they had taken from the government has run out, and they are not back in a position to be able to take care of themselves with the debt load that they've taken on with the spending that they have at this point. So there are two camps. One says you continue to hold out, and we hope in a year or two they will be able to go ahead and continue and take care of themselves. The other says, forget it. We can't double down on this, and it's time to make serious changes.
That's what we ought to be doing.
But I guess that and I'm not sure where I come down on this camp, but I guess the question is, do you make things worse? Do you risk 1934 all over again if you stop the spending now?
I put myself in the Chris Christie camp. States need to take this opportunity in this moment to finally fix their budget mess. Washington shouldn't continually bail them out and postpone the inevitable budget changes that need to happen. What happened in the 30s, and we're having this great debate about the 30s, a lot of revisionist history occurring. Hoover started with the stimulus spending. He gave us tax increases. Then FDR just finished up and did the same thing. What happened in the 30s, I would argue, was higher tax rates, protectionism, demagoguing business with bank populism and things like that, and then more uncertainty in the economic climate, more uncertainty in business, more uncertainty among economic producers, small businesses, as to what's coming ahead. And what do you think we're doing right now? We're doing all of those things. We're repeating the same exact mistakes that took a tremendous crash and recession and turned it into a Great Depression. What I worry about here is because of government policies, state and federal, we might get our own lost decade scenario just like the Japanese got. Because of the carry trade, because of the Fed, and because of all the dangerous fiscal policy, higher taxes, more regulations, higher spending, we could have our own kind of slow growth, no growth, managed decline, lost decade scenario.
But you would agree, I imagine, that the Christie model has the potential for cutting too close to the bone, right?
Not really. No, I really wouldn't, because I think...
How much pain are you willing to withstand?
You have to understand, when government does all of this borrowing, they're taking money from the private sector. When government does all of this spending and borrowing, they're committing our kids to higher tax rates in the future. They're committing more uncertainty into the marketplace. And so I believe if we actually reduce spending, that's almost like the new supply-side tax cut, putting in place an actual fiscal plan to control and reduce spending would be good for the economy. Obviously, I'm not a Keynesian, so I'm not going to give you a Keynesian line. Right. I'm sort of the opposite. I'm in the opposite camp, showing that we are getting a grip on spending is the best thing we can do to inspire confidence in the marketplace and show that the future is going to be better. Because right now, with all the spending, which is borrowed money, that means higher interest rates, higher tax rates, more economic uncertainty. That's bad for the economy. The opposite of that will help us get this economy growing again.
Yeah, I guess my only question is, uncertainty, you're right, comes from government policies. Uncertainty also comes from government spending going away in the lack of any other spending.
I'm not worried about government spending going away. I'm just worried about how high it is. I don't think we're going to cut too much with government spending. Look at this current Congress. I mean, last year we had an 84% increase in domestic discretionary spending in the last session of Congress. It's astounding how much money is flying out the door in Washington.
To fill a vacuum that was left by a major crisis, right? I mean, you can't deny
well, sure.
that.
No,
it's not like it happened in a vacuum.
I'm not going to deny we had a major crisis. I would simply say that the response to the crisis, this $862 billion stimulus, didn't work. I mean, it was supposed to keep unemployment below 8%. It was supposed to create 3 to 4 million jobs.
Do you think we'd be better off if we hadn't spent it, though?
No, I think we would have been better off with a different kind of a stimulus. I think we would have been better off with
spending,
lower
but just
taxes.
spending in different ways.
No, not spending. I think we would have been better off with real entitlement reform to show that we're getting our fiscal house in order. I think we would have been better off with lower tax rates and not an assault on capital, not an assault on producers, and not this takeover in healthcare, this takeover of FinReg, this takeover of energy. When you look at every major sector of the economy, one theme occurs, that the government is inserting itself as the dominant player in the marketplace, and that makes economic actors less confident to go forward and invest. So I really believe what government is doing now is making matters worse. That's the problem. Look at the sovereign debt crises that are popping up all around the world. What we're seeing here is the welfare states are kind of at their last legs. Welfare states don't work. They're economically unsustainable. You eventually run out of other people's money to spend. And so we see this when we turn on the TV in Europe, and yet our current government is doubling down in the same direction. And that is scaring people. That is scaring businesses. That is scaring the economy. And that, to me, is what is wrong with the current direction of government policy and all of this stimulus. Stimulus, even if you're a devoted Keynesian, you would have put it all in infrastructure spending. You do bridges and roads. That's about 4% of the stimulus money. Most of that money was social spending. It had nothing to do.
In a lot of ways, it was paying for teachers and firemen,
or budget shortfalls,
or budget shortfalls, and basically delaying states from doing the necessary things to clean up their fiscal books.
But we were supposed to be in a different position a year and a half later, and we're not.
Like stabilizers, we all agree that automatic stabilizers, which is what we call mandatory spending, is necessary. You know, job training, unemployment benefits, COBRA, things like that are necessary. Those were already in place. They threw all this other stuff on top. It's about 1.1 trillion when you factor the borrowing. That's 1.1 trillion that's coming out of the economy, that's being borrowed, and that is being basically mostly social spending, not even the Keynesian-inspired infrastructure spending. So even if you're a dedicated Keynesian, this isn't even the right way to go. So I would simply argue our economic policies from the government are really a big problem, and that is a source of our problems that we have today.
I'm glad you're here today. We have a lot to talk about.
I'm trying to fill in for Joe Kernan here. You know, I'm doing a good job. I mean,